One of the biggest problems with trying to improve your pronunciation is simply not knowing what sounds right. So this makes you not want to practice because you don't want to reinforce the wrong thing. We're going to train your ears in a little bit of a special way today using an approach of negation, which means you'll hear what not to do based on the quality of the sound that you're making. This will then help your ears know what is correct in comparison. In order to do this, we need to remember the 4 general guidelines of sound quality: tenseness, restriction, nasality, and closeness. Restriction tends to cause about 80% of the problems, especially in this back area. And at the very end, the last thing that we're going to do is focus on hearing the quality of this back area so that you can really get that in place. We're going to explore some different positions and sounds, first with some extra nasality, then we're going to do the same thing with extra tension, and then we're going to do the same thing with extra restriction. Now, the best way to explore this and start training your ears is to actually look at some real American English sounds that we'll see in phase 2. Let's start with ah. Ah, ah, ah. But what happens if I do exactly the same thing, but I try to let most of it go through the nose? Ah, 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 ah. It almost sounds like a completely different sound. Let's look at another example. Ah, 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 ah. How about the E sound? E, 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 E. Now let's do the oo sound. Oo, 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 oo. The next step is I'm going to produce random different sounds. Some of them might be English sounds, some of them might not be, but they will either contain nasal or no nasal. I will do it with no nasal first, and then with nasal for the same sound, and then I'll move to a new one, and we're going to do that for many different sounds, many different positions, and just listen very closely to the difference between the non-nasal and the nasal. Eh, ah, ah, ooh, ah, eh, ooh, ooh, oh, Let's move on to the extra tension that we want to avoid. We're going to do this exactly like we did for the nasality, exploring different sounds in different positions. Ah, 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 ah. So what I'm doing there is I have extra tension in my jaw. I'm making this really tight. And I'm also bringing in a little tension here, but just by holding too much tension, it throws the sound off. Let's look at ah, 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 ah. So if you get this bit of a ah, you probably have too much tension somewhere. Let's do E, 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 E. Let's do ooh, 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 ooh. So here, obviously, you can be holding too much tension in the lips. I was also trying to add more tension to the jaw and to the tongue. Let's move to step 2. I'm going to produce random different sounds, first without extra tension and then with extra tension. Eh, ah, ah, oh, oh, ooh, ooh, eh, ha, ha. Now for restriction. As I said, this causes most of the problems, especially from back here. First, we'll start with ah, 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 ah. You also don't want something like this. Ah. There I'm going too high. Ah, 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 ah. It should sound nice and open, nice and clear. Let's look at ah, 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 e, e, e. Now let's look at ooh, 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 ooh. Let's move to step 2. I'm going to produce random sounds. Some are American English, some are not. Eh, oh, oh, z, 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 Now before we move to this back part here with the top of the throat, we want to explore 3 special cases with the phase 0 exercises, which is the back of the tongue up, the middle of the tongue down, and the middle of the tongue back. That's because these tend to cause extra problems or have extra special things that you want to be able to hear and remove. They are ultimately related to this area or filling up this area in a way that you shouldn't. For the back of the tongue up, this of course will directly help your k, g, and ng sounds, which are very commonly off even though they might be very close. It should sound like this. If you release it, so you see how the entire way, even as I'm closing, it will start getting a little more closed because I'm closing, obviously, but it still sounds very open. There's no extra restriction. There's no extra tension that stands out. Compare that to this, which is a very common mistake. So just by adding a little tension here or sort of bringing that back of the tongue up or back a little bit, you easily start getting restriction. You want to avoid that. Also, when you close, you don't want to push into the nasal flap. That's what this sounds like. It's like a restricted nasal sound. Of course, when we close this one, this is the only one that actually closes, we do want to hear nasal. Another common mistake that many people make is they don't actually fully close. So let's listen to the difference between fully closed and not fully closed but nasal. I'm not closed. That's closed. There's nothing coming through the mouth. Now for the middle of the tongue down, the thing that usually goes wrong here is the further you try to go down in the middle, especially because you're trying to hold the back in place, this will actually close. It's like a lever, right? This comes down, that goes up. You don't want to do that. You have to hold this open and in place as the middle comes down. This will directly translate to several sounds, but especially the center of gravity, that we're going to learn in phase 1. The correct way so you see how it still generally sounds pretty open. Now compare that. Now let me try to do it where I'll go down, but I'll just have a little bit of extra restriction. Let's see. The middle back, and this is a similar type of problem, except instead of closing here, what commonly happens is you're trying to move this back into the back of the tongue, and you'll either end up tensing too much, which will take up too much space and cause restriction, or you'll actually let the whole tongue come back and it'll start blocking the throat, which also causes restriction. You don't want that. You don't want that. A little bit of restriction is normal for this particular direction, but just a little. Not Now for the biggest piece, and I cannot overemphasize that. This controls everything. Back of the tongue being pushed forward will also cause significant problems, and that kind of goes with this. But if you don't have this, you don't have anything. A very brief overview so we know what we're doing. Many languages hold this tighter, a little higher, just the top of the throat. We want to bring it down, which means you're going to have to relax some things, but not everything, because you have to hold it there. You also have to push out a little, and you have to let go of the tension that's holding it in. Now, depending on your specific language or even you as an individual, maybe it's already down, maybe it's already out, maybe it's already in place. Who knows? But that's what we want for American English. Now, I've realized two little secret tricks that help people to really get this a lot faster. One is, as far as the throat goes here, it needs to be pushed out a bit, release the tension holding it in, as I said, and you want to feel as if there's a little finger, just a single finger, going straight through the back of your neck, as if somebody's pushing it out right here, right on the top above the Adam's apple. Not the Adam's apple itself, just right above, right in here, this exact spot, pushing outward, just as if it's resting, not pushing like this, just very lightly. Now, in addition to that, we know that the tongue might still be pushed forward, and we don't want that. So make sure the tongue is not pushed forward. Let it settle down and back as this lowers, if it didn't already. For the true schwa sound, not the full center of gravity, but the actual true schwa, this needs to be in place, but then you're going to take, again, like a finger, going straight through your head onto your tongue, right in the middle of the tongue, just a little bit backwards. A little bit still in the middle, but not exactly middle. Very light little pressure, not pushing down, just a little pressure. For the ear training, what we're going to do is first, I'm going to just keep this in place, but I'm going to push the tongue forward because you have to be able to hear that as well, so you can tell if your tongue is pushed forward aside from just trying to feel it. So I'm not trying to make a different sound. I'm not trying to say eh or something like that. It's just when I naturally just push that tongue forward, things change. Now, of course, there are other little things that might be off. Maybe you're pushing the tongue forward in a slightly different way. Maybe it's not as pushed forward. So you're going to have to play with it, but that gives you a good starting point to kind of figure out what you should be doing based on what the correct sound sounds like. Now we're going to play around with this top of the throat area. So first, I'm going to keep everything correct. The tongue is not going to be pushed forward. This is going to be held open a bit, but I'm going to try to raise the top of my throat. I'm not going to make it tighter, just make it too high. uh, 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 Now let's see what happens if everything is correct, but the top of the throat is pulled in a little too tight. Uh, 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 Now the last two things that we're going to try here is one, if it's too high and too tight, I'm just going to try to do that as best I can. You might sound a little bit different, that's okay. And then we're going to see what happens if you go too low and too out, so that you can also listen for that to find the boundaries. Now if you're too high and pushed out, and if you're too low and pulled in, let me know if this helps you guys. Next up is the Phase 1 lesson, where we're going to start building that actual full posture of American English while keeping this in place. Thank you guys so much for watching another English Hacks lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.